The day of my husband's funeral felt unreal, like I was watching someone else's life from a distance. The sky was gray, heavy with clouds that threatened rain, and the cold air clung to my skin as if it knew I was breaking inside. People gathered around me, whispering condolences, their faces painted with sympathy. I nodded, thanked them, and tried to act like a widow who understood what was happening. But deep down, something felt wrong. My husband had always been full of life, careful, cautious, not the kind of man who would make reckless choices. Yet here I was, standing beside a closed casket, being told he was gone forever. The explanation they gave me didn't sit right. An accident, they said. Sudden, unavoidable. But the words echoed hollow in my mind. I watched the people around me closely. His co-workers stood together, stiff and silent. Some of his relatives avoided my eyes. A few whispered behind gloved hands, stopping abruptly when I looked their way. It felt less like a farewell and more like a performance, everyone playing their role, reading from a script I'd never seen. As the priest spoke, memories flooded my mind. The night before his death, he had been unusually quiet. He checked his phone more than once, then turned it face down, like he didn't want me to see the screen. When I asked if everything was okay, he smiled and said, "Just tired." I believed him. I always did. Now, standing there, I wondered what I had missed. The air felt thick, pressing in on me. I wrapped my coat tighter around myself, trying to shake the feeling that this funeral wasn't meant to bury my husband, but something else entirely. When the service ended and people slowly drifted away, I stayed behind, staring at the casket. I whispered goodbye, even though the word felt like a lie. Whatever had happened to my husband, I knew one thing with terrifying certainty. This was only the beginning. I was about to leave the cemetery when my phone vibrated in my hand. At first, I ignored it. It felt wrong to check messages at my husband's funeral, like a betrayal I wasn't ready to commit. But the vibration came again, insistent, urgent. My heart skipped as I glanced down at the screen. An unknown number. For a moment, I hesitated. Then I opened it. "I'm still alive. Trust no one." The words blurred as my hands began to shake. My breath caught in my throat, and the noise of the world faded into a dull hum. Alive? That was impossible. I had stood through the service. I had watched them lower the casket into the ground. I had listened as everyone told me to be strong and move on. I locked my phone and scanned the cemetery. People were still there, lingering in small groups. Some hugged, some cried, some checked their watches, ready to return to their lives. I wondered if any of them knew what I was reading, if any of them were watching me right now. I typed back with trembling fingers, "Who is this?" No response. My chest tightened. I tried calling the number, but it went straight to voicemail. No name, no greeting, just silence. I felt suddenly exposed, like every person around me could see the message glowing in my palm. Memories rushed back in sharp fragments. His careful habits, the locked drawer in his study, the times he'd stop mid-sentence when I entered the room. Had he been afraid? Had he been hiding something from me to protect me? A cold realization settled over me. If the message was real, then the funeral had been a lie. And if it was a lie, someone had gone to terrifying lengths to convince me my husband was dead. I slipped my phone into my pocket and forced myself to walk away calmly, even as panic clawed at my chest. One thought repeated over and over in my mind, louder than the rest. If he was alive, someone wanted me to believe he wasn't. By the time I reached my car, my hands were cold and unsteady. I sat behind the wheel without starting the engine, watching my reflection in the windshield. I barely recognized the woman staring back, eyes wide, jaw tight, every instinct on edge. The message echoed in my head like a warning siren. Trust no one. I replayed the funeral in my mind, frame by frame. His brother's stiff hug that ended too quickly. A co-worker who offered condolences without meeting my eyes. The family friend who asked strange questions where I planned to stay, whether I'd be alone. At the time, I dismissed it as concern. Now, it felt like surveillance. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't the unknown number, just a missed call from a relative. I didn't call back. I couldn't. The simplest conversations suddenly felt dangerous. Words could be twisted. Trust could be used against me. I drove home the long way, checking my mirrors more than necessary. Every car behind me felt like a shadow. When I finally pulled into the driveway, I noticed something small but unsettling. The porch light was on. I always turned it off during the day, always. Inside, the house felt different. Too quiet. I walked room to room, noticing details I'd overlooked for years. A drawer that didn't open smoothly. A picture frame slightly crooked. Dust disturbed on the bookshelf. Had someone been here? Or was my fear inventing patterns? I opened his study and stopped short. The locked drawer was open. My heart pounded as I stepped closer. Inside were papers I'd never seen, names, dates, a folded map, and a burner phone. This wasn't paranoia. This was proof. I closed the drawer and backed away, understanding settling in with brutal clarity. My husband hadn't just disappeared. He had prepared. And whoever stood beside me at the funeral, smiling, grieving, whispering, might have known exactly why. I sat on the edge of his study chair, the open drawer between my knees, staring at the life I never knew my husband was living. The burner phone felt heavier than it should have, like it carried more than just plastic and circuits. I turned it on. No lock. No password, as if he'd wanted me to find it. The screen lit up with a single note saved under no name. If you're reading this, I couldn't tell you the truth without putting you in danger. My chest tightened. Page after page followed dates, meeting locations, names crossed out in red. Some were familiar. A co-worker, a family friend. Others meant nothing to me. Yet all of them were tied together by one word written over and over. Transfer. I unfolded the map. Routes were circled in black ink, stretching across borders. Drop points marked with small X's. This wasn't an affair. This wasn't a midlife crisis. This was something calculated, organized. A knock at the door made me flinch. I shoved the papers back into the drawer and slid it shut just as my phone rang. His sister's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring out. The silence that followed felt louder than the knock itself. I returned to the burner phone and opened the call log. One number appeared repeatedly, always late at night. I dialed it before I could talk myself out of it. One ring, two, then a voice, low, controlled. You shouldn't be using that phone. My blood ran cold. Who is this? I whispered. A pause, then, your husband did what he had to do. And now, so must you. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, the truth crashing over me in waves. He hadn't disappeared to escape me. He'd vanished to escape them. And by finding his secret, I had just stepped into the place he'd been trying to keep me away from all along. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound felt amplified: the ticking clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant cars passing outside. I sat at the kitchen table with his papers spread out in front of me, tracing the lines on the map again and again. One location was circled harder than the rest, the ink pressed so deep it nearly tore the page. By dawn, I knew where I had to go. I packed light and left no note. Trust no one, he had said. That included the people who claimed to love me. I drove for hours, the landscape slowly changing as I followed the route he'd marked. Each mile felt like I was crossing further into a life he'd kept hidden from me. The address led me to a rundown storage facility on the edge of town. The gate creaked as I stepped inside, the air thick with dust and silence. Unit numbers were faded, some doors dented, others rusted shut. I found the one that matched a code written on the back of the map. Inside, the unit was small but carefully organized. A duffel bag sat in the corner. Inside it, I found cash wrapped in rubber bands, a second phone, and a flash drive labeled with today's date. My hands shook as I plugged the drive into my laptop. Files filled the screen: videos, documents, audio recordings. Names I'd seen crossed out were now paired with proof. Transfers, threats, conversations that made my stomach turn. This wasn't just a secret. It was a network. A shadow moved outside the unit. I froze, heart pounding. Footsteps stopped just beyond the door. I shut the laptop and slipped the flash drive into my pocket, barely breathing. A voice called my name. It wasn't his. In that moment, I understood the final truth he'd been trying to prepare me for. The clues weren't just leading me to answers. They were leading someone else straight to me. The truth they never wanted me to know. The door slid open slowly, metal scraping against metal. I stepped back, every nerve screaming at me to run. A man stood in the doorway, his face calm, almost apologetic, like this was a conversation he'd rehearsed many times before. "You weren't supposed to come alone," he said. I didn't answer. I held the flash drive tighter in my pocket, realizing now that it was the real reason I was still breathing. He glanced at it, as if he knew exactly where it was. "They used your husband," he continued. "He was careful, too careful. That's why he had to disappear." Disappear, not die. The truth spilled out in pieces. My husband had uncovered a financial operation moving money through legitimate businesses, charities, shipping companies, even government contracts. When he tried to walk away, they gave him a choice: vanish, or make it look like an accident that wouldn't raise questions. The funeral had been insurance. Closure for me, silence for everyone else. "He's alive," I whispered. The man nodded once. "For now." Sirens wailed in the distance. The man stiffened. "You have one chance," he said. "Give me the drive, and you go home believing the lie. Keep it, and your life won't be quiet again." I thought of the message: trust no one. I thought of the drawer he'd left unlocked, the trail he knew I'd follow. "I already chose," I said. I ran. Shots echoed behind me as I burst into the sunlight, heart pounding, lungs burning. I didn't stop until the noise faded and the road stretched empty ahead of me. Days later, the story broke. Arrests, raids, names exposed. The network collapsed under its own weight. I received one final message from the unknown number: "You were never supposed to be part of this. Thank you for finishing it. I still don't know where my husband is. I don't know if I'll ever see him again, but I know this much: he didn't disappear to leave me behind. He disappeared to make sure I survived."